On this opportunity to accumulate health, we are busting myths once again, namely 4 health food myths, or you might say even slogans. So many who are putting in intensive effort to live their healthiest life. But so often people are being derailed by the lure of gluten-free, sourdough, fat-free, and potentially even nut butters. So many people, they go gluten-free because they have an immune reaction or an intolerance to gluten. They get brain fog, they get bloating, they get feelings of just overwhelming fatigue when they consume it, which is a good idea to avoid gluten in those cases. Or maybe you have celiac disease and you literally cannot eat it without just overwhelming autoimmune activity happening. However, in both cases, if our switch is to go from eating gluten to eating gluten-free processed foods, health accumulation will be short-lived. Gluten-free only means that the product does not contain gluten. The gluten-free bakery, gluten-free chips, pizzas, cereals, crackers, they still all contain the fixings of ultra-processed foods, like corn syrup, like vegetable oils, like refined flours, literally stripped of their life-giving nutrients. So I would suggest, instead of going gluten-free, processed, choose buckwheat, quinoa, millet, sweet potatoes, sprouted oats. All are gluten-free, but are whole foods. Secondly, we're discussing sourdough bread. I know this would be a tough one right here. I understand that the industrialized world is pumping out sourdough bread. People are selling on Instagram courses, but fermented sourdough bread, 72 hours, sure. Native gluten's reduced. But just because you reduce gluten from the flour via fermentation doesn't transform a refined grain into a life-giving whole wheat berry. Now, if you're taking whole berries, milling them, making sourdough bread, then excellent. You are getting loads of B vitamins, minerals, vitamin E. You're getting that fibrous material, that bran, and that feeds your gut flora. But in my corner of the USA, we have a local company that makes sourdough bread that is sold in the health food stores. But unfortunately, even though I want to support locally, I can't buy it because one, it's not organic flour. I would always use organic flour. Otherwise, it's going to be loaded with pesticides. There's just no way around it. Two, they actually put artificial vitamins into it because it's a refined flour. So they got to throw some folic acid in there. And it has essentially zero fiber and it has emulsifiers. So even though the producers, I'm sure their intentions are good, in the end result is not a health food. It is a blood sugar bludgeoning food, and that is going to defer health. So per my wife, she said it takes about 5 extra minutes to make your own sourdough bread from wheat berries at home versus just making, say, your sourdough bread from Costco's organic flour. It can be a little more stressful, she says, because it's not as forgiving, but it takes about 5 more minutes. All this said, though, if you're getting organic flour, you're making homemade sourdough bread, you're doing your family a great service. And compared to buying bread at the store, I want to applaud you. All right, next up is our fat-free labels. So these are one of the worst offenders when it comes to people thinking they're doing themselves a health service, while unfortunately creating an inferno of food cravings. Fat, in its whole food form, creates intensive satiation. And it also enables us to absorb vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K. I've never understood why a person would take the yolk, the orange part, the yellow part from the egg, unless they're allergic to it. Let's remove all the nutrients, the support for cell membrane integrity, for brain health, because we want to meet a particular mathematical equation created by a dietitian, because there's too much fat in the yolk. It's crazy, folks. It is wild. We have so much food abundance in America that we can literally strip fat from the food, the most caloric dense part of the food, and still consume far more calories than we need to survive. In fact, we get really plump here in America. So when we remove the fat, we got to add in stuff. So gobs of sugar, artificial sweeteners, thickeners to get that taste that we're looking for. Yes, we're really silly people. Unfortunately, our lack of food intelligence has created this tsunami of disease and dysfunction. for ourselves and our children. People, fat, it's your friend when it's the real deal. Not vegetable oils, not these processed fats, but fat in its whole food form. All right, the next one is for those who are trying to transform their body composition and find they're plateauing, even though they're eating whole foods. I've seen this over and over again, where a person is consistent, fat loss trajectory is happening to them, and then they add in a bar with nut butter, or they start consuming peanut butter, or almond butter, or macadamia nut butter, and all of a sudden, just fat loss is halted for weeks, for months. So what is going on here? So this doesn't make nut butter unhealthy, but I think it's important to recognize that when we eat almonds, we absorb about 20% fewer calories compared to we eat almond butter. So given the caloric density of nuts, this can easily lead to a couple hundred unaccounted calories. So whole nuts, they're shown to have a much higher satiation factor than nut butters. If you're aiming to control portions, keep your appetite in check, and keep shedding those pounds, then you probably want to steer clear of the nut butters and the nut butter based bars and stick to just straight up nuts. All right. If there is a health myth you have fallen for or a lifestyle adjustment that you've made that's had a dramatic difference in your health accumulation story, then I want to hear about it. So put it in the comments and I'll read every single one of them. All right. I'll talk to you guys and gals later.